In the summer of 1998, Ronaldo Nazário wasn't just a footballer, he was a force of nature. At 21, he was o Fenômeno. He moved too fast for the human eye and far too fast for the era's defenders. But hours before the World Cup final, the phenomenon broke. July 12th, room 290 at the Château de la Grande Romanée. The air is thick with the smell of pre-match massage oil and nerves. Suddenly, silence is shattered by Roberto Carlos screaming for help. On the floor, the best player in the world is convulsing, his body locked in a violent, mysterious seizure. He's foaming at the mouth, his tongue swallowed. It isn't a sports injury, it's a life-or-death crisis. 72 minutes before kickoff, the team sheet reaches the press box. The name Ronaldo isn't there. The world stops spinning. Then, like a ghost appearing from the fog, he walks into the dressing room. He's pale. His eyes are sunken, but he's holding his boots. He looks at Coach Zagallo and says, "I'm playing." He stepped onto that pitch at the Stade de France as a shadow. He wasn't tracking the ball, he was tracking his own survival. Every time he collided with the goalkeeper, the world held its breath, waiting for him to snap. Brazil lost 3-0, but the score didn't matter. The inquiry that followed, the conspiracy theories about Nike forcing a sick man onto the pitch to protect a $160 million contract, changed the game forever. It was the night the boy who could do anything realized he was mortal. After Paris, the world thought the nightmare was over. They were wrong. The next 3 years weren't a career, they were a medical horror story. In November 1999, playing for Inter Milan against Lecce, the first crack appeared. Ronaldo's knee buckled, a ruptured tendon. He spent 5 grueling months in rehab, locked in gymnasiums, fighting to prove the critics wrong. He was desperate to show that the phenomenon was still the master of his own fate. He returned for a Coppa Italia final against Lazio, a night that was supposed to be a coronation. He lasted 7 minutes. Without a single player touching him, Ronaldo drove at the heart of the defense. He attempted a trademark step over, the move that had humiliated 1,000 defenders. In an instant, his knee literally exploded. The patellar tendon didn't just tear, it disintegrated, snapping like an overstretched cable. The sound was a sickening, visceral pop that was loud enough to be heard by the players on the bench. The stadium fell into a haunting, total silence. Lazio players didn't celebrate the turnover, they stood frozen. Panicked doctors rushed the pitch as Ronaldo clutched his leg, his face contorted in a scream that signaled more than just pain. It signaled the death of a career. The diagnosis was a death sentence for any athlete. Most specialists said he would never play again, let alone at the elite level. He was 23 years old, the prime of his life stolen by a freak biological failure. He spent the next few months confined to a bed, unable to even lift his own leg. He went from the fastest man on the planet to a man who had to learn how to walk again, one agonizing inch at a time. This wasn't just a physical injury, it was a 3-year exile into the shadows, where the world slowly began to forget his greatness. By the spring of 2002, Ronaldo was a ghost. He hadn't played a full match for the national team in years, and the Brazilian public was terrified. The explosive, muscular phenomenon had been replaced by a man with scarred knees and a heavy gait. Luiz Felipe Scolari took the ultimate gamble, pinning the hopes of a football-obsessed nation on a player who many believed was physically broken. To deflect the intense media pressure and the constant suffocating questions about his fitness, Ronaldo debuted the most infamous haircut in history. He shaved his head, leaving a bizarre, lonely semicircle of hair at the front. It was a tactical distraction. He wanted the world talking about his hair instead of his tendons, giving him the mental space to breathe. In the final in Yokohama against Germany, the distraction ended and the legend returned. 67th minute. The German keeper Oliver Kahn, the Titan who had been unbeatable all tournament, spilled a shot from Rivaldo. In an instant, Ronaldo was there. It wasn't a 50-yard sprint, it was a predator's instinct. He tapped it home, and the weight of 4 years of pain evaporated. 12 minutes later, He sealed his immortality. Kleberson crossed it low. Rivaldo let it dummy through his legs, and Ronaldo was waiting. One touch to settle, one look at Kahn, and a clinical side-foot finish into the bottom corner. He didn't just win a trophy, he reclaimed his life. 8 goals, the Golden Boot, and the 5th star for Brazil. As he was substituted in the 90th minute, he wasn't just walking off a pitch, he was walking out of a nightmare. He had conquered his own body to remind the world that class is permanent. Ronaldo arrived at Real Madrid not as the sprinting lightning bolt of his youth, but as a seasoned king. He was the Galactico among Galacticos. He scored within 61 seconds of his debut, proving that even with a body that was failing him, his brain was still playing a different sport. This was the era of the heavy king, where his movements were sparse, but his impact was lethal. To understand why he is the real Ronaldo, you have to look at the stories written on the goal line. Take the 1996 masterpiece against Compostela. He picks the ball up in his own half. He is hacked, pulled, and dragged by his shirt, but he refuses to go down. He weaves through a defensive line that looks like it's standing still, leaving bodies in his wake before slotting it home. His manager, Bobby Robson, famously clutched his head in disbelief. He looked like he had seen a miracle. Then, there was the 1998 UEFA Cup final, one-on-one with the keeper, Marchegiani. Ronaldo didn't even touch the ball to beat him. He performed a step-over so violent, so convincing, that the keeper simply fell over, mesmerized by a ghost. Ronaldo walked the ball into an empty net. These weren't just goals, they were humiliations of the highest order. Even at Old Trafford in 2003, his legend grew. A hat trick of such pure, clinical genius that when he was substituted, the Manchester United fans, perhaps the most tribal in the world, stood up as one. They didn't care about the scoreline. They gave him a standing ovation because they knew they were watching a dying star still outshining the rest of the galaxy. He made the impossible look effortless, and the legendary look routine. As the mid-2000s rolled on, the phenomenon began to battle a new enemy, his own metabolism. Diagnosed with hypothyroidism, a condition that slowed his body down and caused weight gain, the critics grew cruel. They called him Gordo, the fat one. They focused on the scale instead of the scoreboard. But even a slowed-down Ronaldo was a nightmare for a defender. He learned to conserve every ounce of energy for that one, explosive second inside the box. He traded the long-distance sprints for the goal-line predatory instinct, proving that while his speed was gone, his genius was untouchable. In his final years at AC Milan and then back home with Corinthians, the tragedy of his physical decline became undeniable. His once golden legs were now a map of surgical scars and chronic pain. Yet, every time he stepped onto the grass, you could see the flickers of the 19-year-old who had conquered the planet. He played through the pain because the pitch was the only place he felt truly alive. He wasn't just playing for trophies anymore. He was playing to prove that the spirit of a champion cannot be broken by a failing anatomy. He was the ultimate what-if story. If his knees had held, if the seizure in Paris had never happened, we wouldn't be debating who the greatest of all time is. We would be naming the sport after him. The end finally came in 2011. Ronaldo stood in a room packed with microphones, his voice cracking and his eyes filled with tears. He didn't lose his passion for the game. He lost the war with his own body. He famously said, "My head wants to continue, but my body can't take anymore. I think of a move, but I can't perform it."
It's very hard to leave something that makes you so happy, to which you gave so much, which you love so much, and could even continue doing, because mentally and psychologically, I still want to, but one also has to accept some defeats. I lost to my body.
It was the ultimate heartbreak, a genius trapped in a broken machine. But the legacy he left behind wasn't just in the trophies, it was in the goal line stories that felt like myths. We remember the 1997 Copa America final, where he left defenders in a heap just to chip the keeper with a coldness that felt illegal. We remember the Inter Milan days, where he would juggle the ball through a swamp of a pitch, defying physics and defenders alike. These were the moments that defined him. The slalom runs, where the ball seemed glued to his toe, and the no-touch feints that sent the best goalkeepers in the world to their knees in shame. He was the reason a generation of kids wore silver boots and practiced step-overs in the rain until their shins bled. He was the phenomenon who proved that you could fall to the very bottom, lose everything to injury, and still climb back to the top of the mountain to claim your crown. There will be other Ronaldos, and there will be other record breakers, but there will never be another force of nature like the boy from Bento Ribeiro. If you enjoyed diving back into the story of the original O Fenômeno and want to hear more deep dives into the legends who defined the game through these goal line stories, it would mean a lot if you could subscribe to the channel. We're building a community here for those who love the soul of football, and having you along for the ride is what keeps these stories alive. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you at the next kickoff.